Hey folks, this is now part 3 of my series on biblical chronology. If you have not yet checked out parts 1 and 2, please go to my channel and do so now. Thanks! So in my last video, I covered some of the information surrounding the birth of Arphaxad from the time period of the flood from 2312 BC to his birth in 2310 BC. And also, I had a slight typo in my last video. I actually had on the screen that it said he was born in 3310 BC. That's been corrected, as you can see here. He was born in 2310 BC. But now let's move on to the next part. So in this video, I'm going to cover the time period from the birth of Arphaxad in 2310 BC down to the birth of Terah, who is the father of Abraham. And I have his birth year as 2060 BC. Now we can get the dates for these patriarchs by looking at Genesis chapter 11, starting at verse 10, where we have the birth of Arphaxad 2 years after the flood, and going forward down to Terah, who again was the father of Abraham. Now, most of the timeline and chronology of these patriarchs is laid out in a very straightforward fashion in Genesis chapter 11, but there is one particular name that creates a bit of an issue, and that is the name Canaan. And this is not the same Canaan that was listed in Genesis chapter 9, where we read about Noah cursing Canaan, the son of Ham. This is a different Canaan, a Canaan that is the son of Arphaxad and the father of Selah. Now, this Canaan, son of Arphaxad and father of Selah, is listed in the genealogy of Jesus given in Luke chapter 3. And it's also listed in the Greek Septuagint translation of the book of Genesis, which predates the birth of Jesus. But the name is missing from the Masoretic text, where it goes right from Arphaxad to Selah, skipping Canaan. So the question is, was the name Canaan here added to the Septuagint and to the New Testament, or was it left out of the Masoretic version of the Old Testament? And I'm of the opinion that the latter is actually the case, for a few different reasons. First of all, omission is not the same thing as contradiction. If a name is left out, and we see this in other places in the Bible, including the genealogy of Jesus, where we can see names purposefully being left out, that doesn't equal a contradiction. But to add a name that never was there in the first place, that's more problematic. And I don't believe that that's what the Bible is doing. Secondly, I don't think this is something that can be chalked up to a simple matter of scribal error. I believe that everything in the Bible is written and placed there or not placed there for very specific reasons. Now, we can see in the Septuagint that there's at least 4 inclusions of the name Canaan in Genesis chapter 11, and all 4 are missing in the Masoretic text. This is something beyond just a simple scribal error. Additionally, there are ancient traditions and stories about this particular Canaan that go way back. There are extra-biblical texts, such as the Book of Jubilees. Now, I don't hold that to be inspired scripture, but at least shows that there were stories about this figure that predate the birth of Jesus, suggesting that this is not just a scribal error, but an actual person. And in those traditions, this particular Canaan would have been the father of a rejuvenation of astrology after the flood, something that would have been considered wicked and sinful by the Jewish people. So there's a reason why the name may have been blotted out of the text. In the genealogy of Jesus found in the book of Matthew, for example, in chapter 1, we see that there are names given totaling 14 from Abraham to David, and then from David to Christ, another 14. But the problem is, when you look in the Old Testament, there aren't actually 14 kings in his line. There are more than that. But those kings that are left out here in Matthew appear to be rather wicked kings according to their narratives and stories in the Old Testament. So it appears that their names are being left out, perhaps because of their wickedness. And so some biblical scholars, such as Dr. Helen Jacobus of the University of Manchester, have argued that there is a curse on the name Canaan here in this particular passage, that it is purposefully being blotted out, and cites a number of different reasons that this 13th in the line from Adam was cursed and therefore left out of the Masoretic text. But if that's indeed correct, and I believe that it is, then that creates a bit of a problem, because as I mentioned at the beginning of this video series, I hold the Masoretic text to be the correct text in terms of its methodology for dating the patriarchs. And if they leave out Canaan from their list in Genesis chapter 11, how do we then determine what the proper dates are for this missing figure. Now, as you'll recall, here is a clip from part 1 of this video series where I said the following. But in the Septuagint, the main difference between that and the Masoretic appears to be, at least on the majority of the numbers, simply adding 100 years to the age of the patriarch when he has his firstborn son. Now take notice of that pattern of practice, because that's going to become important later when we get into another section of our biblical chronology. So this now is that other section. I believe the solution to our problem is very simple. Since the Septuagint does include the dating for this particular Canaan in the book of Genesis, and since the Septuagint tends to add 100 years to the birth dates of the Masoretic text, all we have to do is take the numbers of the Septuagint, subtract 100 years, and that will tell us what the proper dating should have been had it been included in the Masoretic text. And so that's what I've done here. And that's what gives me a birth date of the year 2275 BC for Canaan, and a birth year of his son Selah of 2245 BC. I've merely taken the numbers of the Septuagint, but applied the dating methodology of the Masoretic in order to achieve the proper date. And when I did that, everything else in the chronology falls into place perfectly, including the astronomy that backs it up. So again, where the Masoretic text is missing the numbers for the birth year of Canaan because they omit information about him, I've simply gone to the Septuagint, look at the information that is included there about Canaan, and including his age at the time of his firstborn son, and then I subtract 100 years from that, because the Septuagint tends to add 100 years to the ages of the patriarchs when they have their firstborn son, compared to the Masoretic text. So that tells me what the number should be in the Masoretic text if Canaan had been included. And that's how I arrive at my dates. And it works perfectly. And I think that this issue surrounding Canaan, the son of Arphaxad, is an important chronological issue that has been neglected in many other attempts at biblical chronology. I think this is a major piece that solves a lot of riddles when it comes to adding up the dates in the Bible. Now, in the next video, Part 4, I'm going to look at some other issues that surround the time period from the birth of Terah to the birth of his son, Abraham. And we'll explore more on that in the next video. So, stay tuned.